This video is sponsored by nobody, because I'm small. However, I do have a novel on Amazon and Kindle. Find it in the link in the description below. Caesar's Legion, a faction within the Fallout series that is so brutal, so unapologetically vicious, most games since have been afraid to even come close to the levels of evil this faction portrays. Sure, other games have had evil factions, but few are evil in the same way Caesar's Legion is evil. So this faction unapologetically practices slavery. They believe the only value a man has is how much he can conquer before dying, and the only worth a woman has is how many men she can produce before dying. They will gladly torture, mutilate, and enslave men, women, and children in horrific fashions if it means furthering their war efforts or simply demoralizing their enemies. They are without a doubt evil in every way you can describe it, and that's why it's going to be difficult to explain why this faction is so great. But oh, they are. To put it simply, Caesar's Legion is great because they're so bad. Now, being bad is not the same as being great, but Caesar's Legion does it right. Now, at first, you might be tempted to attribute their greatness to their honesty. I've heard it said many times before that at least with the Legion, you know what you're getting. But even in the most unobservant playthrough, you'll see how untrue it is for the many factions of the Mojave who attempt alliances with Caesar's Legion. For example, the Great Khans and the Fiends were told that since they have a common enemy, the Legion will take them in as equals so long as they fight against the NCR during the Battle of Hoover Dam. Except this isn't true. In the case of the Khans, a representative of the Legion can be baited into admitting their plans to betray the Khans after the Khans serve their usefulness at the Battle of the Dam. The Khans are chem dealers after all, and being in possession of chems is a one-way ticket to the cross within the Legion. And even if they didn't use chems, who's to say that the Legion would treat them any differently than they've treated the 87 other tribes that were obliterated and assimilated into the Legion? They also lied to the people of Nipton. See, Nipton was a small town in the southern regions of the Mojave that really had a reputation for vice in a way that's not so different from maybe what you'd find in New Vegas. The city was also run by a corrupt mayor who was convinced by a high-ranking Legion soldier, Volpes and Colta, to set a trap for some NCR soldiers who commonly visit the town on their time off. Except instead of a trap for the NCR, the mayor discovered the trap was for the entire town, himself included. The Legion used a lottery system in a sort of ironic cruelty because the town had its own lottery system. He did this to selectively kill all but 2 residents and, of course, the courier who showed up later. If you speak to Volpes, he'll tell you that he did all of this to teach the town a lesson. But really, what good is teaching a lesson to a dead person? You might also be tempted to claim Caesar's Legion is great because they're free from corruption, except they aren't. Now, if President Kimball of the NCR raised the taxes on the people of the Mojave, skimmed off a portion from the top, and gave it to himself and his senators as part of their wages, you would rightfully call this corruption. After all, they would be using their office for their own financial gains. However, if Caesar instructed his men to raid a town, took 100% of the spoils for himself and his generals, and did nothing whatsoever to compensate the men who risked their lives to obtain the spoils, you would not call this corruption. This would be business as usual within the Legion. Caesar declared by way of the sword that anything and everything is his by right, and therefore he's immune to corruption, as are his generals, so long as they take from the soldiers beneath them, and so on down the line. And so technically, yeah, the Legion's free of corruption, because corruption is your right as a leader. Caesar's Legion is not honorable. They're not quick to adapt. They're not uniquely resourceful. On the surface, the Legion's not too different from the many raider factions in Fallout that use brutality and violence to get what they want. But what makes Caesar's Legion a great faction is because they don't apologize for what they are. While the NCR questions its purpose, the Legion says without remorse, we will wipe out these people, enslave their remaining, and raise their children as soldiers for our next conquest, all without ever stopping to ask, are we the bad guys? And sometimes it's fun within the context of these games to play as the unapologetic villain who devotes themselves to a cause without ever questioning him or herself, and Caesar's Legion provides a player with a way to do that. When coming before Cesar for the first time, many players are even surprised to find in the seat of what should be a tyrannical thug is instead a well-spoken, well-versed, and well-informed dictator whose charisma has converted many on their first playthrough to join his side. Instead of a mindless savage, the player can enjoy lectures from Caesar, who is well-versed in Roman history, military tactics, and philosophy of the old world. He even goes so far as to criticize the player's character for not being more well-read like Caesar is. And while he makes it clear that the reason you're doing them is because you must be obedient to him, he enjoys giving a short lecture here and there to explain his reasons. For example, when he instructs you to destroy the Brotherhood of Steel, he gives an impressively scathing criticism of what their faction represents. I personally am a big fan of the Brotherhood of Steel, and still found myself agreeing with Caesar when he gave his line, "It's been 200 years, and they still have the mentality of scavengers. They say they're preserving these technologies, but for what? They have no vision, they offer no future, they're a dead end." Agree or disagree, a good character causes you to think and consider their side. Many players are convinced to fight for the Legion upon meeting Caesar. Caesar gives the player a faction that, in all of its cruelty, is absolute, and that alone is enough to make them a good faction. But if you, the player, are like me, you don't enjoy being the plunderer, the villain, or the brute. You prefer to be the altruist, the hero who risks life and limb to help other people, even going so far as loading previous saves to ensure you choose the option that makes the most people happy. See, people like us have all the more reason to love Caesar's Legion, because when confronted with the corruption, greed, or incompetence of the NCR, Mr. House, or an independent Vegas, we can defend our actions as altruist because at least we're not helping the Legion. For the altruist in Fallout New Vegas, there is no perfect choice, but there is a wrong one. The NCR incorporates people into their expanding nation, but they don't crucify them. Mr. House acts in his own self-interest, but he does not enjoy cruelty. An independent Vegas may be unpredictable, but it doesn't enslave its people. Whatever faction you choose, if it's not Caesar's Legion, you can argue it's the good choice. Even the most devoted legionary player will admit that the Legion will make life worse for everyone in the Mojave. Even the factions who have or can make alliance with Caesar's Legion will be worse off eventually, because to believe the Boomers, the Great Khans, the Omertas, or the Fiends will be left to their own devices after they help the Legion secure Vegas is to not understand what the Legion is. See, there can only be one Legion, and separate self-serving factions cannot exist within that Legion lest they offer an alternative to the absolute. These factions must be destroyed, enslaved, and incorporated into the Legion for the betterment of the Legion. And by giving the player the option to choose Caesar's Legion, not choosing Caesar's Legion feels all the more satisfying. For the character that could become a monster but chooses to be good is far more respectable than the character that has no choice but to choose good. No matter your choice in Fallout New Vegas, Caesar's Legion is a great faction because they give weight to every decision in the game. Whether you choose to be with them or not, few can argue that this faction doesn't at least make you question if you'd have more fun being the bad guy. I'm sure there are many of you with different views or opinions on Caesar's Legion, and you're welcome to share them in the comments below. It's hard to say keep it civilized when we're talking about a faction of warlords and slavers, but I encourage you to do your best to keep it within the context of Fallout, and I thank you for your time.